We are recording, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paula, and welcome everyone. My name is Mike Peterson, the mayor of the city of Cottonwood Heights. It's Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, and it's 5:01 p.m. So again, welcome. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at their agenda. And the first item on that agenda is our guest from Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District talking about a proposed fee increase. And Scott Bracken, our councilman, is the chair of their board. But Scott, I think
Mayor,
go ahead. Yeah.
I think you need to read that written declaration first.
I hate reading that thing. All right.
But I appreciate your solidarity in skipping over agenda items. I tried that last night and got fixed.
Oh, I highlighted it right here and was ready to read it. So I apologize for that. And let's go back on my welcome, and I'll read the determination by the chair of the city council concerning our anchor location. And it states, pursuant to Utah Code annotated 524-2074, the city's mayor, as the chair of the city council, hereby determines that conducting the meeting of the city council on this date at an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. It is well recognized that a global pandemic currently exists related to COVID-19, which has the potential to overwhelm Utah's healthcare system. Therefore, due to the state of emergency caused by the global pandemic, I find that conducting a meeting at an anchor location of the current state of public health emergency constitutes a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at that location. Therefore, we are on Zoom, and Shane just got on board, so he knows that I read it. All right, now back to the agenda, and welcome once again. And we'll turn the time over to Pam Roberts, who's the general manager of Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling. And Scott, any comments before we turn it over to her, since you are a representative? You want to tell us how well she's doing or anything?
No, Pam has been in charge of the district since it began in 2013, and prior to that, as the when it was a division of Salt Lake County, has been doing a great job. We're always looking for ways to improve things and keep costs as low as possible. So I'll turn some time over to her. I believe you can share your screen if you want to, if you've got some of that presentation, or you can just talk to us, Pam.
Okay. Well, it's easy for me to go by something in front of me. I hope that will work for you as well as soon as I can. There.
Yeah, and I think everybody received the information in their packets too. They may have it. I know I have it, but
Okay.
Feel free to share your screen.
All right, I tried. Let's see if I can do it again. There we go. Okay, so thank you very much for having me here this evening, and then also Scott, thanks for those wonderful compliments. I appreciate it. We have a dedicated team, as you know, at the district. So what I'm here tonight to talk about is the 2021 budget that includes a couple of fee increases. There's no fee increase to the base fee for the general services of the garbage and recycling collections. That stays the same. And just so you know, our board has adopted the budget just last night. In fact, we had our November meeting where the board had the public hearing, and they had the option to adopt the budget, and they went ahead and did that. So this budget has been adopted. These fee increases have been approved.
I know, Pam, you're cutting in and out. I don't know what it is.
Maybe I need to sit closer.
I don't know.
Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
So the first fee increase that has the bullet point there is the bulk trailer rental. And that's going to move from $145 a rental to $175. That's where residents can rent the trailer to be parked in their on their property for 3 to 4 days, and they can load it up. We come haul it off. And then the fee increase, and this is the first fee increase for the Curbside Greenways subscription program. We rolled this out in 2014 at $9.50 a month, and it's very important that that service covers all its own costs. What we've seen over the past few years is that we've increased our need for container repair and replacement, and then we also had some wage increases that the board authorized to come into 2020. So we have some cost increases, so there was salary, fuel maintenance, and then also the container repair. So we're moving from from $9.50 a month to $10.50 a month. So it's $1 per month increase. The annual cost of that or fee is $114, and we're going to $126, and that'll start January 1. The other important thing that the board and I wanted to highlight is that the 2021 budget includes the area cleanup, what we call the modified area cleanup that we ran this year. We're running it again next year. And just to emphasize the why, I think is what people really want to know why. And it was primarily due to staffing issues that we had already experienced in previous years that would be compacted, and actually were compacted with the COVID-19 pandemic. We did have staff and still have staff that are being exposed and need to quarantine or actually becoming ill with the virus itself. Luckily, we've had everyone return that was ill, but currently still have someone out, and we're hoping for the best. So starting in May, we delayed the process of starting because we needed to make sure that our staff were prepared, because there's an onboarding process that takes place. It's very intense. And when you're trying to bring on 21 drivers, which the traditional program requires, that takes a lot of time from staff, and we didn't want to expose everybody during a pandemic or take any chances. So we delayed the start, and then the board authorized us to do a modified program, which I'm thankful, because we were only initially able to recruit 16 drivers for the program in 2020. And so we were already 5 short. And as you know, our mandate is to provide that curbside service. So it's difficult to pull full-time staff over to these part-time, we hire part-time CDLs for this particular program. And I didn't know if everyone on the council knew that. But anyway, let me go to the results from that we experienced this year. And then we'll get into the evaluation survey. Does that help? I hope you can still see that.
That's better. Thank you. I was going to suggest that at the right time. Yeah.
That was huge. So we delivered just over 9,500 containers district-wide, and we picked up almost 8,500 tons of bulk waste, and everything was in one container. So anything that was green was considered bulk. So that tonnage that you see is all inclusive. And then if I scroll down, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, so hopefully we can get both in and you can still see that. And we did a comparison to 2019, even though it's not apples to apples, at least it's a comparison that we can look at. In 2019, we picked up 11,470 or delivered 11,470 containers. And we picked up a total of just over 11,000 tons. So you can see there's about a 3,000 ton difference. And part of that is the number of containers that we were able to deliver to residents to be parked in their driveway. The other reason and thought behind having it in a driveway is that when it's on the street, it becomes an attraction. It's kind of like ants to a sugar pile, that they're immediately attracted by construction companies, landscapers, And then we also have those pesky scavengers that go through and pull out the metals. So we didn't experience any of those safety issues this year. We also didn't experience the big piles that our team has to physically handle. And that was one of the recommendations, and still recommendations, from the National Waste and Recycling Association of America, is that sanitation workers do not handle the waste. There are times that we might have to, so we try to gear up our team to do that. But on a large scale like this program, it's very difficult to protect them. For Cottonwood Heights specifically, you can see the number of homes. We look at the number of single family dwellings that we service, and then the number of containers. We're about 170 containers short from the 2019. But if you look at the container per home ratio, and this particular ratio is just trying to compare, again, some apples to apples, to say how many homes were serviced. And I understand that that may or may not be accurate, because not everybody shared their container. Not everybody accessed their neighbor's container, but that's some kind of a apples to apples. You'll see that there's something new in 2020, and that's called the cancellations. That's something that we're going to target going into next year, of how can we have a cancellation list, a waiting list. So when there are cancellations, a resident can just automatically be booked on that day. So we're looking at revamping our scheduling system. Please understand that in 2020, we had about 2 weeks. Once the board said go on this, we had 2 to 3 weeks to develop a scheduling system. And it was very cumbersome. The only thing we had to go by was the trailer rental schedule that's on our website, which basically books up to 14 trailers a day. And we needed to book 80 to 100 a day. So you can imagine that, if you tried to book a container, I'm sure you understood it was very cumbersome. So we're trying to improve that for this year, or we will improve it, I should say. As far as tonnages for Cottonwood Heights specifically, we were about 200 shy with if you look at the combination of it all, it's just over 200 tons shy in 2020. But if you think about the way we delivered those containers and the residents that used it, it's nice to have those that really need it, get it, and use it. We're thankful for that. We also get mattresses, tires, fridges in those containers. And then understand there's an additional fee to that, and we pay that. For mattresses, it's $15 per piece. So if there's a mattress in box springs, that's a total of a $30 fee to us. Tires are $3 and fridges are $12. And I think those are actually going to go up to $15 in 2021. So let me get down to, and I always have the philosophy of the picture speaks 1,000 words. So the upper left picture is when we run the traditional program, and you may think, well, this couldn't happen very often. It actually happened a lot. And when we're fully staffed with 21 drivers and 6 ground crew, we can better manage that pile that you see there, but it is still difficult. It still takes a lot of time. It slows us down. It's very inefficient and very costly. And then you can see this lower right. That's what it looks like when we went to go pick up containers in driveways. Very easy for the driver to tarp it, haul it off. It was much more efficient this year, less strain on staff. And then we did a cost comparison so you can see where we actually saved almost $350,000 by running the program this way. I anticipate that there will be a higher cost going 2021 because the team has become so much more efficient in knowing how to run the program. It was a very big change for us as well, and for our drivers. They were used to just following a map and dropping containers in the street and off they go. Now they had to find addresses, which was a challenge. So we did purchase some GPSs for the trucks so that they could use those. And we'll continue to do that next year to help them to expedite the services. The staffing, as I mentioned, I'll scroll back up just slightly here. Whoops. We started on May 11th. Normally we start mid-April, but we had to delay, as I mentioned, and we ran it for 111 days. The normal program, or the traditional program, runs about 115 days. So we're just shy of that, which saves money. But the biggest thing I want you to see are the bullet points below 2020 and 2019. As I mentioned, we started this year with 16 drivers, and these are, again, part-time CDL drivers. We averaged 12 a day because of needs to be off for illness or quarantine and any other reasons. And at the end of the season, we were down to 10. So we were still able to provide the services that we did because it was so efficient for everybody. The drivers basically averaged about 10 containers per day when we got down to those 10 drivers, and it was manageable. Going into next year, we're anticipating being able to, let me just back up. We planned on delivering 80 containers a day. We got to a point with efficiencies that there were some areas we were able to do 95 to 100 a day. And it also depends on the dumping location in proximity to that particular municipality. If there's no questions right now, I'll keep scrolling down. We did we call it a satisfaction survey, but really it was an evaluation survey because most of the people that answered this survey were the ones that used the service. So we send out hyperlinks on our web and on our Facebook page, Twitter, etc. We also emailed out surveys to just over 9,000 emails that we had on our records to send to residents to try to get a good pool. There were 414 Cottonwood Heights residents that answered the survey. We received a 77% satisfaction from Cottonwood Heights. One of the biggest issues was that we ran into problems with the mailing of the postcards. We got the postcards to the mail, to the post office on time, but that hit right at about the time there were delays going on. Things were taking a little longer than normal. But we did try to push the word out through the PIOs and get the word out to the residents, but there was a big delay. And I know that many people were frustrated about that. Compared to 2019 and overall district-wide, there was an 83%, 2020, there was an 83% satisfaction district-wide. And then in 2019, there was an 81.6 satisfaction rating. So it actually improved district-wide. And you can see the percentages of how people responded to these questions. There were 53 comments. 53% of the people that responded to the survey left some comments, and we'll get into the generalities of that. But you can see the average satisfaction rating and then how each municipality ranked us. And then you can see as we went to the outlying areas, there was a slight decrease in the satisfaction ratings. And we're looking at those issues specifically to target. Let's get into the comments here. There were 225 residents that left comments. 83 of those residents supported this change. And then 32% of 32 residents said they don't support it. The biggest issue is they want more availability, which I think we'll be able to do, like I said, between 90 to 95 containers a day. There were issues, like I said, with the scheduling, the confirmation of scheduling, and that's something that we want to beef up so that when a resident schedules or reserves a time on a day, that they receive confirmation within, hopefully immediately. If we can't get it immediately, at least within a couple hours. The challenge with that, just so you know, behind the scenes, we have to verify that the person that's scheduling is actually the homeowner rather than a renter that might be doing it. We just need to verify with the homeowner that they're okay with that. So that can take a little bit of time. there were some comments of wanting to, basically all year long. And that's something, if this is really, if 2021 goes well, if it's something we want to continue and look at expanding this district wide, that somebody could do it once a year at any time, depending on availability. We do know there would be cost increase associated with that, because if we keep it, within a municipality and certain dates, then that increases our efficiencies rather than going from Harriman to Cottonwood Heights or something of that nature. But it's something we can look at and consider depending on what residents want to do, and if the board will allow us to do it going forward after next year.
I was just say, one of our discussion points last night was with the uncertainty going forward with the situation and the health and well-being of the employees. We didn't think it was prudent to go back to the old way of doing it simply because we just didn't have time, and we've got no idea of, to start up a program in April, you've got to start doing it a couple months ahead of time. And so the board basically felt giving Pam and her staff another year to tweak this and to deliver and improve on the services the way they are, to see how it actually runs with some proper preparation would be the best way to handle it. It's certainly nicer to have fewer people involved that have the potential to have potentially infectious interactions with people.
Yeah, and there are so many unknowns going into the end of this year and into 2021, and I really appreciate the board allowing us to give this a go another year, because with the staffing shortages previous to COVID, it was a challenge, and we had to pull full-time staff over from the curbside routes. Last year, it was all hands on deck, to be honest with you. We had an average of 11 drivers short on area cleanup per day, and then we were also at least 10 drivers short on the full-time staff. And then just to kind of give you a little bit of information and background of the why it's so hard to recruit and retain, is because we're in a very competitive industry with long haul driving, construction, Amazon, just to name a few. And what the national associations for waste and recycling are seeing as a nationwide shortage of CDL drivers. And we really need the next generation to start looking at trades and enjoying getting behind the wheel and driving is what we really need to happen. But we do have a very aggressive onboarding program where we will work with people to obtain a CDL and actually pay for that just to get them in the door. And as you can imagine, that's an investment we're willing to do, and we hope that they'll stay. So that kind of gives you a background of the challenges.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Pam coming. And I wanted to make sure everyone on the council understood that going forward that the area cleanup will be similar to what it was this year, and some of the reasons why, because we'll obviously get some questions about it.
Well, Scott, and I think it's also important to clarify when we talk about green waste and blue waste, that green waste there's a fee. I assume the blue waste there's not a fee. So does that mean the blue waste is a self-sustaining enterprise in itself?
The
Very
recycling?
Good. Yes, the blue waste recycling, yeah.
Actually, unfortunately, right now, recycling is actually a little bit more expensive than just the general waste, just because it's commodities and the way that the market has shifted over the last couple of years. But we expect that will go down. There's some things that are happening locally and worldwide that will probably improve that. Recycling used to be a revenue generating item. That's been 3 or 4 years since it has been. But the infrastructure being in place, we're willing to keep it going. It'll be a lot harder to stop it and just try to start it back up when recycling gets back to the point where it probably will be probably in the next year or two. So But the recycling has always been covered with the general month-to-month fees that you're paying, that base fee. And it's
think
not a
that's-
subscription.
yeah,
We roll
that's
it out to
important
everyone.
That's important to note that that subsidy comes from our base fee we're paying in. Yeah.
Right. The green waste and glass curbside pickup are both optional by subscription services. So the people who are opting for those have chosen to do those.
Yes, and just to kind of piggyback on what Scott's talking about with the base fee, and we consider the base fee to include one garbage can, one recycling can, and then we have the seasonal services. Leaf bag is going on right now, very popular. We do have parks that are full, and we're staying on top of that. Even with some of the staff shortages, we do have supervisors and managers that will jump in when we need them. And then we have the area cleanup, which is considered a seasonal service, as well as the Christmas tree in January. So that's what we consider our service package. Really, the $17 a month that we all pay as residents will mainly cover the curbside services, and the area cleanup as an additional service is something that we draw down our cash. That helps, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. How's your fund balance doing?
It's healthy. If you look at the cash that's left, we have just over $6 million, and just so you know, that's only about 4 months of expenditures. The carryover is healthy, but then as we spend that down and spend all of our cash, that's what's gonna, as you know, Mayor, because you ran a district.
Yeah.
But you understand it does go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're happy to go through 2021 and not have to have a fee increase. We do anticipate something in 2022, which I'm sure I'll be back before you to explain when we get there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Any questions, any additional questions from the council regarding this proposed fee or anything with our waste and recycling efforts in our city? I think we're very lucky. It's been very efficient, and Pam's done a great job and has come in and updated us regularly. And that's why I asked the question about the fund balance, because again, it's a real challenge when you look at cost of replacing vehicles and those things. It's a real challenge. But any questions anybody have?
Mayor, I was just going to mention, I appreciate not some areas of the city, they dump their garbage kind of on the side of the road, and I appreciate it not being that way in Cottonwood Heights.
Yeah, well, we hope not. Yeah. All right, Pam, thank you. We'll excuse you. I'm sure you got fun things to do tonight while we continue our meeting. So we'll excuse you.
All right, thank you very much. It's good to see you all.
Take care.
Take care.
All right, referring back to your agenda, we'll now review the business meeting agenda. And the first thing on that agenda is the Ferguson Canyon parking, or the Ferguson area, Ferguson issue parking permit. Mike Johnson, you want to tell us a little bit about what we're going to discuss at that point?
Yeah, so that's just a work session discussion tonight.
Wait a minute, I'm off again. Let me turn my paper.
Wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's go over to to the business meeting again. We have citizen comments. We have a public hearing on the proposed budget amendment, which was presented by Scott in the last meeting. We have 2 public comment items. One is the Union Park rezone. Mike, you want to talk about that rezone just a little bit? I know we'll talk about it also in our work session, but.
Yeah, actually both public comments were applications we received. They're both paid applications from, I should say they're not city initiated proposals. One is a rezone. It's actually where the famous Dave's is, over on by the interchange on Fort Union Boulevard. It's not famous Dave's anymore, but it's that building.
Yeah, it's vacant now, yeah.
Right. The text amendment, we kind of talked about this a little bit a month or so ago. An application was made by the the gravel pit development applicant to modify some of the language in the PDD ordinance regarding affordable housing. So we'll bring that back to you and talk about that more in the work session.
Thank you. We have 3 action items. The first one is approving an amendment to our budget, which will be a result of what Scott presented last week and the public hearing tonight, but I think it was pretty straightforward. Any questions on that? The next item, which is 6.2, is approving the rezone of 1166 East Fort Union, which is also in the public comment, if I understand correctly, right, Mike? Same location?
Yes. Yep.
Item 6.3 is approving an updated affordable housing plan. Tim or Mike, who's going to talk about that?
I can talk about this one. This is different. So last year, you'll remember we adopted an affordable housing plan. That's an element of the general plan. I believe last year, the year before at the state legislature, there were new requirements put in place for cities to establish affordable housing plans. And they had to include certain goals and elements. And then they provide projections of housing needs in the city and area median income and a bunch of data that shows how we're doing as a city, how many households are considered low income in some way, and how many units are available and what the need is, that kind of thing. And then that general plan element, I believe, has to be revised every 5 years, something like that. But then annually, we are required to provide an update report. That's just updating the data and kind of a progress report on the goals that we established in that more comprehensive plan. So this is the 2020 report, and this is due to be submitted to the state of Utah by December 1st.
Is this where the legislature had the menu of items you had to choose so many from regarding affordable housing?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Any question on any of those items in our business meeting? Thank you. Hearing none, let's, if I can keep us straight here, keep myself straight, let's go back to our work session where I just left, and let's talk about the Ferguson parking permit issue or application that you all had in your packets. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. I know this is part of the introduction. I know Christine and I met with some residents in front of the Ferguson Canyon trailhead and witnessed some of the challenges. So this is a valid concern with respect to at least evaluating it and seeing what the application says and what the implications are. So Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to add the petitioner for this. I'll go over a staff overview and summary of the request first. And then we can turn some time over to the petitioner if you've got any questions. He is a resident in that area. So let me go ahead and add him here. All right. And I will share my screen. Okay. So this map here shows a summary of the existing permit parking area by Ferguson Canyon, and it's turned sideways so you can see more of it, but north is to the right. I can try to, if you can see my pointer here, the Ferguson Canyon trailhead is where the hand is right now. The red area shown on the map is the existing permit parking area. So that's been in place for 10 or so years. I don't know exactly, but quite a while. So that's been there. There's no proposed change to that. The petition that was submitted proposes to expand that on-street permit parking area where you see the orange, essentially down to Honeywood Cove Drive, that intersection there, kind of where Prospector becomes Top of the World, and there's a few branching intersections. The rationale provided by the petitioner behind why this area is when you take a distance from the trailhead to the overflow parking area, which it's a dirt lot right now and will be fully improved in 2021 as a parking lot. It's about 0.3 miles from the trailhead. The added on-street permit parking area in orange here would put you almost the exact same distance, about 0.3 or 0.31 miles away. So the real rationale here is this will eliminate any incentive for people to park on the street on Prospector Drive rather than utilize the overflow lot by making the permit parking area the same distance in all directions as that overflow trailhead. So again, a summary of the request is to expand the existing permit parking area south on Prospector to about Honeywood Cove Drive. Again, the purpose is to mitigate on-street parking challenges caused by area visitors, especially on heavy trail days. So you see heaviest usage in spring and summer days, usually on holidays and weekends, but not always. Sometimes it's during weekdays, but that's the impact it's seeking to mitigate. And as I said, the rationale is to expand that permit parking area south the same distance as the overflow lot. The request affects 19 residential properties. In order for a request to make it to this point tonight, to be in front of the council for consideration, at least 51% of the properties affected have to sign the petition. And in this case, 15 properties have signed that petition, which is well above the 51% threshold. So the council now has the task of reviewing the request, but they are by code obligated to make a decision one way or the other to take a public hearing. So by getting that 51% of signatures, it's become a formal request that is under consideration now. These are from the petition that was submitted. I just copied, this is not all of the photos, but this is some of them that illustrate the problem that the petitioner is seeking to mitigate. And some of these are from the same day, some of these are from other days. There are labels and captions in the actual petition that you have. And I'll just note that some of them were weekends and a couple of these photos were on, like a Tuesday or something like that, just to demonstrate that this isn't just a weekend problem. And then a photo was, a couple here, one was submitted. You've got some pedestrians, kind of laying on the hill on private property there. We see the overflow lot, which again is not improved yet, will be in 2021, but still usable. And some of this picture of the overflow lot was taken on the same day as some of these photos. And you can see it's just not utilized because people can park on street and be closer to the trailhead. So this is kind of the finer detail, but now once the petition was submitted and is complete, staff is tasked with conducting a full analysis based on some of the criteria in the actual parking ordinance. And the staff memo details this a little bit further. I can certainly talk about any specifics in there if you'd like, but I'll just kind of stay high level for now. In our review, the Community and Economic Development Department is tasked with reviewing these and making a recommendation to council. But in doing that, we consulted with other city departments. Within our department and based on our analysis of the petition against the code and against some of what we've heard in public hearings and in resident phone calls and emails, we find that the proposal reasonably complies with the ordinance criteria in the code. And as was noted in the staff memo, I think context is important here because this isn't a brand new parking permit area. And I think that could change the dynamic of this review and process if there was nothing in place today, but there is quite a substantial permit parking area in place today. So this is just an expansion of that. But the proposed expansion does meet the minimum criteria, like I said, to require a public hearing and council consideration. And the request, once that overflow lot is fully improved, and even to some extent today, we find would encourage the use of overflow parking by eliminating the advantages of parking on Prospector Drive to save a hike up to that trailhead. so that, like I said, the existing dirt parking lot can be used, and that overflow parking lot will be improved in the ballpark of 70 parking stalls. I don't know the exact number, but that will be up and in use in the next year. So it's the council's role to make the final decision here, and the council has some discretion, but just based on an objective analysis of the ordinance, this proposal does seem to comply with all of the criteria, and could merit approval if the council wanted to vote that way. Now, I will note, and Mayor, I'll leave it to you if you want to turn some time over to Robbie to expand on any of these. There was a letter from the police department. We sent the petition to them for input, and we got a letter back from the police department. They are generally opposed to this petition, to the expansion of the permit parking area. I listed some of the reasons here. It goes into a little more detail in the letter that's in your packet, but the concerns that were brought up were that the permit area does not redirect vehicles to a viable parking location as it does in other permit parking areas like the rec center. They identified potential conflicts with the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, by discriminating between resident and non-residents on a public road. The police department felt the intent of the permit parking program is to reduce congestion and neighborhood parking issues near hospitals and schools, not access to the mountains. There would be enforcement challenges presented by the expanded area, and maybe some confrontations when maybe a car that is legally allowed to park but doesn't have the parking permit displayed is towed, and just the general enforcement challenges presented like that. And then neighbors were not given adequate notice. That was included in the letter. To address a couple of these, the rationale would redirect vehicles to a parking location, and we understand it's not improved at this point. It is usable, but will be a full parking lot here in the next year. And then regarding the notice, that is the next step in this process. We are required to give notice, and at the December, I believe it's December 1st, the next council meeting, we have to follow the noticing procedures, which is to send mailers to everyone within the affected area, to publish a notification in the newspaper, and to put notification signs actually out in the right of way there to let people know that there's a hearing and how they can participate in that. So that hearing has not happened yet, but will be scheduled for the next council meeting. Part of our review and research on this petition, we looked into some of the other cities around to see which cities had permit parking ordinances, and of those, which had existing permit areas, and then even further, of those existing permit areas, were any similar to this? Were they in trailhead areas? So you can see here, not a ton, and it's kind of half and half of those that actually have ordinances that allow permit parking programs. But for example, Mill Creek and Harriman, Salt Lake City, and Park City are all municipalities that do have permit parking areas near trailheads currently. I know Mill Creek has one and is actually considering another. Harriman has one. Salt Lake City and Park City have multiple. And we realize those are slightly, different scales of cities than Cottonwood Heights. But this is just an example to show we're not kind of out on our own on this type of petition, on this type of program. There are permit parking programs in other cities in Utah. And certainly you see these are much more common in the large metropolitan areas where on-street parking is very limited and is a challenge. So as I said, the next steps are public notice. Those will go out at the end of this week. The hearing, which will be on December 1st. And then starting at that next meeting on December 1st, this will just be on the agenda as an action item. The council is required within 30 days of that hearing to take final action. And I believe that's all I have. So I will stop the share for a second, and I can pull up any slides that you'd like. If you've got any questions of staff, I'm happy to try to address them.
And we have the applicant here also. Is that true? Is it Kelly?
Yeah, Kelly is with us, and then if you'd like police input as well.
Yeah. Well, I think
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Kelly. Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Kelly,
good.
we'll go ahead and give you a minute to state your position, and then I definitely want to have Christine make some comments. It's her district, and I'm sure she's had numerous conversations with residents, and of course, give Robbie a chance to make comments. We've got about 30 minutes or so, and of course, I got several questions dealing with this issue historically myself. So, Kelly, go ahead, give us your position and thoughts real quickly, please.
Thank you very much. I've been a resident here since 2005, and this has been an issue that's come and gone. In fact, in front of my house, I used to have permit parking sign in front of it at one time up until about 2014, and then it was taken down. But it's a situation that continues to get more severe as time goes on. I think there's just more and more people are getting into our mountains. There's more and more interest in the hiking trails, and then the COVID just blew it up. But it was difficult even years before. As a resident that's affected, and probably I'm the one that's most affected because it's my house where the parking by permit stops, and it's all the things that most people would understand, the annoyances of having people from outside the community parking in your yard. You know, that photograph that was shown in my petition was my house, where there was a group of people just kind of hanging out in my front lawn, you know, and as a resident, I mean, I get it. I understand everybody's just trying to get up on the trail, but it's very difficult for a property owner, and what you got to put up with. I mean, I've found dirty diapers on my lawn. I've had beer bottles. They just leave junk and refuse. And, you know, and I'm concerned about saying anything because they know where I live. So I'm not going to say anything to them. So there's that part of it that is a concern. I can state, because I've talked to all these people. It was interesting putting the petition together because I got out and I met neighbors that I didn't even know, but every one of them were very enthusiastic about getting this done. I didn't get any pushback. Of the 19 people, the residences, I talked to 17 of them, and one gentleman just said, yeah, I don't want to sign it. I don't really care either way. I'm not against it. And then the other lady who owned the property there, she was very enraged because when I talked to her, it was right when she was having some work done on her property, and she had scheduled people to come work there on a Saturday, and they came on a Saturday and they couldn't bring the equipment in because the whole street was packed with cars, you know? So it really does impact everybody. The only other two I couldn't get a hold of. So I would say there's a strong support for it amongst the neighbors here. And as you get closer to the line where the petition begins and ends, I mean, where the parking begins and ends, it gets less dramatic and less impactful as you get away from that. And that's why we kind of looked at trying to make the distance of this petition to have permit parking such that, as Mike was saying, you know, we don't want it to make it easier for people to park in our neighborhood rather than on the parking that is provided, the overflow parking. So there's all of that. There is another issue here that is very concerning to me. Now, I don't have any children, but I mean, we have people out in the street and stuff anyway, but we have a lot of children that live right around my house. And if you look at the petition, the first 5 photographs, they show they were all taken the same day within an hour, basically, of each other. And I had one photograph, and it was just coincidental, but I had a photograph that I took just showing all the parking, and there was a guy on a bike, there was 2 hikers, another guy getting out of the car with his dogs. And that was at some time, I don't know, it was around noon or something. And then an hour later, I came back out, and there was a big delivery truck taking furniture to my neighbor, and they had nowhere to park but in the middle of the street. So they parked, they had all their boxes out there, and it necked the roadway down to basically, one lane, even if that. And you have, and at that point, you're on a hill. That's the high point of the hill. It's also on a curve. So for traffic and the risk that it presents to visibility for traffic and the risk to people, kids playing in their yard or whatever, I think that's a real concern that a lot of us also feel that should be at least considered in all this.
Kelly, thank you. We appreciate you, bringing this to our attention. We've dealt with something similar to this around the rec center, so we definitely want to go through the appropriate process to evaluate it and gather all the facts. And hopefully Mike has communicated with you with respect to this December 1st hearing, this process, and some discussion now. So
Yeah.
appreciate that feedback. I've been up there myself, looked at it personally, so I've seen it. So you're right on. Let's allow Christine. You want to make a comment, and then Robbie, let's have you express some of your reservations. Christine.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Calder, for spearheading this effort, because as the mayor said, we've heard a lot of concerns about this, and I would say of my tenure here at the City Council, this has probably been the most the biggest issue that people have brought up to me or have brought up in the area. I support the petition. As Mr. Calder said, it's a safety issue. The road is narrow and windy, and there's line of sight issues. And I understand where the police chief is coming from, but I think that this is similar to the rec center. And once we get the overflow parking, it will be no different than the rec center issue. This is recreation in the mountains. The rec center is recreating at the pool or at the facility. I don't know that this equal protection clause is really discriminating between people, because we are giving them a wonderful place to park, and we are going to give a large area for people to bring dogs. And we are going to continue with the parking for handicapped people or people that may not be able to walk that large distance. So I feel like staff has made a concerted effort to really think through this for both residents that live near the trailhead, but also residents who don't live near the trailhead to still be able to walk to the trail within, a reasonable distance. Or if they're unable to, they can, park from handicap. So I too live near a trailhead. My home is on an informal trailhead, and I oftentimes have people speeding up the road, speeding down the road. They park in front of my mailbox because they want shade or whatever the reason is. I pick up poo constantly from people that walk up there. And so I see this, and I love that people are using our trails and our mountains, but I think we just have to be respectful of the people that also live near these. And I feel like this is a great compromise. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Calder, again for this.
Thank you, Councilmember Michael. Appreciate that. And I know you've been heavily involved in looking at it. Robbie, some comments regarding your bullet list of concerns?
Sure, and thank you. And I'm not insensitive to Mr. Calder's issues. I think they're actually valid. I wish there were, I think Mike Johnson represented our position very well. I wish there was another way for people to enter that area and not go through the neighborhood at all. That would be, to me, the ideal remedy, because I get exactly what they're saying, but just a couple things to think about. And we're not, we're not married to any of it. I just wanted to express our concerns on some of the arguments, so you would have the information before you to make the decision. As far as the safety issues, the remedies are already in place. A line of sight, parking in front of driveways, mailboxes. It doesn't have to be resident parking only for us to enforce that. Those remedies already exist. And just for the record, we actually did oppose the first the first wave of resident parking signs up in that area as well. And unlike the rec center, I get that the parking lot isn't done yet. Perhaps if it were finished and improved, I might feel a little differently about it, but I don't think it can handle the traffic, and I'm not sure that it won't do anything except push those cars to the adjoining neighborhood. And I'm not sure they even know that this is being considered, and we're going to move that group of, or that problem down in front of their house. And at the end of the day, it's still a public road. Everybody pays for it. And I'm not sure that I struggle with having an expectation that just because you live there, that only people you say are entitled to park in front of your house on a public roadway. And part of our problem is once you do that, there's a thought that, well, I'll just call the police if they park there and that we will respond. It's resource intensive for us to actually do that. And it doesn't take very long before people park there and don't have a permit, or they're friends of the residents and they get ticketed or impounded. And then they, come looking to us and are frustrated with what occurred. So I will leave it at that. I do understand both positions. I'm not sure. I've thought about it, and I wish there was a different remedy to get people access to that canyon. That canyon's been there a long time. The canyon's been there before the houses were there. So just something to consider. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. I know how challenging it is for me when I go to University of Utah football games and I drive into a neighborhood and want to park and walk up, and I have to find an area that is not reasonably parking. So I know there's precedent, but some questions made for Mike real quickly, and then I'll open up to some more. We're talking about resident only, not no parking. I think around the rec center, it says no parking, but this would be resident parking only. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's parking by permit only, and those permits would be reserved for residents and their guests.
And how would they be? How would the vehicle be notified as a permitted parking?
So we just recently kind of renewed this effort with the residents within the existing parking area. So we have a list of vehicle makes and models and the names of the individuals that live around there that had to come in and apply for a permit, and then we gave them a sticker to keep in their car. And then guest permits are applied for the same way. They just they're just temporary.
They have something, so if you drive by, you can see that it's permitted, and the guest is permitted as well. Another question, maybe for Matt, if Matt's with us. Is Matt with us today? Oh, there he is. He's awake. Yeah. I understand the challenge of implementing or expanding it with the Ferguson parking, overflow parking not being completed. Do we have any idea of the timeline of when that will be completed? Because then that really answers one question about providing communication of where they can park and so that.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, we're finalizing right now the environmental that has to be done. I just got an update today. We have one more clearance, and that's supposed to be done tomorrow, and that should be signed. Once that's completed, we'll go into design. So we're looking at about 3, maybe 4 months worth of design. So hopefully the summer, first part of the summer, middle of summer, we'll start construction on that. So and then you're looking at probably about a 3-4 month construction to finalize it. So it'll put us into fall to have it finally completed, but we're pushing it to, so just the timelines, everything's on schedule. So next year it'll start construction in the summer.
Okay, thank you. Another point of clarification with respect to ADA requirements. If I remember correctly, Mike, that the ADA parking would stay at the trailhead.
Yeah, so that's comes from the access master plan that was just adopted, and the recommendation in there is when the overflow lot's complete, that will become the primary lot, and only the required number of ADA stalls will remain available at the trailhead itself.
So we'll be taking out parking spots up there?
Well, it's just in the master plan, so we will need to figure out how to actually implement that recommendation. I don't know that it's a permanently taking them out or restriping them or what we need to do there, but that's what was in the plan.
Yeah, my understanding is, and again, just a thought, is that we would maintain, there's only a few parking places there, and that would be the ADA parking. And so, and
Yeah, that was my understanding, is they were just going to all turn to ADA.
Yeah.
I guess if that's an over requirement, then you'd have to make another determination. But
well, something we can determine, but that's my understanding as well. Yeah. Okay, I'm anxious to have the public hearing on December 1st, but other comments, questions regarding moving forward to December 1st and taking public comment from the council?
no, obviously, I think we probably should take that. I think my request for Mike and would be certainly to make sure we extend the mailing and the invitation to that public hearing and send out a postcard or something to people that are at least 300, possibly 500 feet beyond the permit area. So that we don't, so that, as was pointed out, the people, so that the next house just beyond doesn't all of a sudden get slammed and we're in the same situation next year. Let's make sure that those people are aware of it and have a chance to come and be heard. I understand and I deal with the issue of, it's a public street. The public should be allowed to park on it. I also understand, living next to a high school, that that can't always happen. That gets to be a policy decision on where we allow parking and where we don't. I'm hesitant, but I certainly understand this, like around the rec center, a high school, some of these other things where it can certainly be necessary. But my biggest request is, let's make sure that for the public hearing, if that's on the 1st or the 15th, that we make sure that those people that are just outside of the area are well noticed and have something mailed to them as well.
No, good comments, and I think it's all part of the process, which again, I'm a process person, so I just need to make sure we have a good.
Well, and we did that with the rec center and adjusted the boundaries based on what those people that were included and didn't want to be, and a couple of people who said, "Why am I not?"
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so
Good comment. Other questions, suggestions, comments?
Mayor, I have a quick question on the newly expanded area, we'll call it, that will be there. Are the people that are possibly on the next leg over, how aware? I know that we'll have public input on this, but they're going to be the next people that are saying, hey, why are we not involved in this? And I guess it really also has to do with how much this new parking, when it is completed, how much that'll change the dynamics of what's going on up there.
No, good comment. One is how many stalls the overflow parking will have, and that's still yet to be designed. I think to Scott's point of making sure that we send out notices, not just right to the border, but over the border. But then as Mike shared with us, when you look at the 1.3 or whatever, I can't remember the distance from the overflow parking to where this extends, I think we have justification to show the overflow parking is within those parameters. So that's, I think, one good mitigating point to, and we'll walk through all this again as we go through it after December 1st before we take a position. It's still gathering facts and information, but this gives us good insight to move forward. More comments, questions?
my only question is, the code was written to have 30 days with it from the time of the public hearing to take action. Is no action considered action, or do we have to affirmatively approve or deny? Is that our only option, Mike?
That's a good question. It just says the council must act by within 30 days of that hearing. So I assume that's an agenda item vote, yes or no.
Yeah, that's an awkward time with the holidays, so that would mean, unlike the
Yeah,
14th.
that basically only gives us the meeting on the 15th to decide, because we couldn't put it off to the first meeting in January.
I'm assuming it could be approved subject to certain things or certain dates or certain clarifications. Shane can probably guide us on that too. Yeah.
One thought is if you wanted more time, you could schedule the hearing on the 15th. I don't know. I think it's from the hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shane or Mike. If you needed more time and wanted to do it at a different time, you could schedule the public hearing at a different time, but that's just a thought.
Yeah, it says within 30 days following the hearing, the council shall deny or approve the designation of a parking permit area.
I'm okay proceeding with the hearing on the first and then moving from that point
I
personally.
guess perhaps if we feel like we really need more time, we can continue the hearing to the 15th.
There you go.
I'm sorry, what's giving you pause, Scott, that would require more time?
I don't know. It may be those people that are just beyond the area. Maybe they come in and they want us to change the area or amend it in some manner. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
I'm
based on the code, I believe they would have to do what Mr. Calder did as well, right? I mean, Mr. Calder has obviously been affected by this, and as are his neighbors, 17 of which are in agreement with him. I suspect that those on the edge, if it becomes a problem, they would address that and we would be here again. I don't know that we should say no to Mr. Calder's request because we're afraid of what others may want to do. They'll have to do the same thing, correct?
Yeah, I think what I was hearing was just if there's some new information on the first that we have not heard, that's totally new, unpredictable, that we would have a mechanism if we wanted to take more time. But if we have all the information, I'm fine having the hearing on December 1st and then preparing to take a position on the 15th or 14th, whatever that is, if we have all the information we need to proceed. Yeah. So if we don't have any further discussion, we'll schedule the public hearing on December 1st regarding the Ferguson parking permit application. And between now and then, Mike or Mr. Calder, if there's additional information, feel free to pass it on to us, and we'll schedule adequate time to go through the information on that time.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for inviting me tonight.
Yeah, thank you for your efforts. I know that's a lot of work to knock on all those doors.
Yes, it is. And people don't answer doors when you show up with a paper clip in your hand and you're wearing a mask.
Well, then now you're experienced to run for mayor or city council, because we knock on a lot of doors and they definitely don't want to answer.
Anyway, it was an experience, and it was a little bit of work, but I enjoyed meeting my neighbors, and I thank you very much. And Mike, thank you for all your support.
All right, good job, Mr. Johnson. And all right, we'll move forward and we'll go from there. Next item on the agenda is Union Park rezone discussion, which is the restaurant on Fort Union, about just below 12th East. Turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you. So this is the summary of the request. I'll walk through these slides pretty quick, but it's pretty straightforward. The action requested is a rezone from ORD, which is Office Research and Development, to mixed use. You can see the parcels there. It looks kind of weird. Those 4 separate parcels are all, when you select one on the county tax records, you get all of them. They're owned by the same, they're all part of the same ownership. However, the 3 parcels that are in the parking lot are encumbered by an agreement with the owner of the Union Park Office Center to only ever be used as parking. And it's just parking set aside for whatever use is in that actual building envelope or that building pad there. And actually, you'll see these three have actually been removed from the rezone request. So all we're really considering tonight is the rezone of the parcel that building sits on. And the recommendation is approval of that, and I will get into the justification of why here. Again, this was most recently the Famous Dave's restaurant. That restaurant has gone out of business and it's now a vacant restaurant building. One thing that's interesting is that restaurant use is actually non-conforming in the current zoning. So in ORD, a standalone restaurant isn't even an allowed use in the Cottonwood Heights ordinance. So the existing use there today is non-conforming.
Mike, did this close before COVID?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, I thought that's just interesting point. Yeah.
So again, this shows as it was originally proposed, the existing and the proposed zone. In our zoning map, ORD and mixed use are both purple, so it doesn't look like a lot of change there, but you can see. And again, that's been revised to just include that one parcel. The primary reason that the recommendation of this is approval is that this whole area has a land use designation of mixed use. So the general plan supports this rezone, and actually rezoning it from ORD to mixed use complies better with the general plan than the current configuration does. That, in addition to the restaurant use itself, actually doesn't comply. Someone couldn't come in and build a brand new restaurant in the ORD zone and be able to have that approved, but they could do that in the mixed use ordinance.
So both ORD and mixed use zones are handled under the general plan mixed use designation?
Yeah. Well, sorry, repeat that question.
Both of the zones for mixed use and ORD are both handled under the general plan mixed use?
No, actually, Office Research and Development has a land use designation. And this is something we'll definitely take a look at as we kick off our general plan amendment, but this whole office park actually has a land use designation of mixed use. So that may be adjusted, but a standalone pad that fronts on Fort Union, we see that up and down the corridor as something we'd like to see go to mixed use. This gives you an idea of the allowed uses in the mixed use zone. And remember, the way this works is the rezone is considered on its own first, and then an actual conditional use or permitted use application comes in after the fact. And as long as it is one of these allowed uses and meets the standards of that ordinance, then it is entitled to approval. So really, you can see, I'm not going to read through them all, but pretty much any use in the city is allowed in the mixed use zone. But it has to meet certain standards for how the building looks and certain setbacks and height requirements and things like that. So it's more based on kind of the form of the building rather than the explicit use of it. In the applicant's narrative, the current intent, and I only say this as the current intent because this could change, is to use that building as a financial institution. I think they're proposing a credit union. However, just keep in mind, if this rezone is approved, they are entitled to apply for any of these uses there. Financial institution, again, their intended use is actually allowed in the ORD zone. They could do it without a rezone. But one of the reasons for their rezone request is, you can see this graphic here shows the setbacks they would need to meet to use the current zone and build a new building. It's essentially 50-foot setbacks on all sides and isn't really conducive to development on a small parcel. The ORD zone really is geared around these large office parks where 50 feet isn't really that much of a setback compared to the lot size. But on a small half-acre pad like this, it just it's not viable to build a reasonable sized building. So that, again, that current Famous Dave's building is not only non-conforming as to use, but it's also non-conforming as to current setbacks. In the mixed use ordinance, they would have more typical setbacks that we're used to seeing that would allow a building similar to what that Famous Dave's restaurant building is.
Mike, on those setbacks, is there any concerns with the future development of, walkability and other things down Fort Union. Does this impact that at all, or do you feel this is still with respect to our planning we've done for Fort Union?
Yeah, it would, those things would be considered. The use, whatever use is proposed, if it's allowed in the ordinance, would be allowed. But we would look at things like pedestrian connectivity to the, from Fort Union to the use. If there are things like driveways or things like that proposed, how do we safely get pedestrians across the driveway?
Yeah.
You know, maybe looking how we integrate pedestrian interaction with the office park even. So those are all components of the site plan approval and things we'd look at the next step.
Mike, what are the height restrictions on this particular piece if it did go to mixed use?
I believe it's, as a permitted use, it's 2 stories or 35 feet, which is just typical. That's your typical residential height. If this is in the Gateway district, which I believe it is, they could request a 3rd story, and that would be a conditional use request of the Planning Commission. But in no case, I think the maximum height in any case is 45 feet.
And did you say the 3 separate parcels are not connected to this? Just to clarify that, are the 3 separate ones?
They'll all be owned by the potential buyer of these properties, but they have been dropped from the rezone request. So they will remain in the current zone and still just be parking. And there's a private agreement that's in place between the property owners that requires those to only ever be used as parking.
Thank you for that clarification.
And that also impacts the intensity of any future use. Just because you could build a 3-story building here doesn't mean you have adequate parking to accommodate it. And they're kind of limited to whatever parking stalls are in those 3 parcels have to meet the parking standards of whatever use is proposed.
And because it was a restaurant, it was a conditional use. Is, you know, it sounds like it didn't comply fully, but was it conditional?
That's, I think, something we just inherited from Salt Lake County. So that was a non-conforming use that, I don't know if it's Famous Dave's or a different restaurant, but the actual restaurant use itself was inherited from a time where that was allowed.
What's considered the front? Is it Fort Union or the access point front?
Yeah, from a setback and sighting perspective, it would be Fort Union Boulevard.
Okay.
So we'll want some sort of, even if the primary entrance faces the parking lot like Famous Dave's did, we won't, as part of site plan review, we won't want the side of that building that faces Fort Union to look like the side of a building.
Yeah. Okay, that was my point. Thank you.
So again, the recommendation, staff's recommendation was approval. And with the suggestion to eliminate those 3 separate parcels from the request. So you can see that shows accurately here. The Planning Commission also supported that unanimously. So they recommended 7-0 to approve that rezone. The one public comment that was in your packet is from the property owner of the office park. They were concerned about some of the impacts of whatever development goes in there. While that is all, those impacts are dealt with at the site plan approval level, the buyer of this parcel and the office park owner have been meeting to go over those concerns. And as of this afternoon, we were told by the office park owner that they had worked through the issues and there's no problems with this request. So that's what I have. So this will be on again for public comment tonight. And then just given that we only had that one public comment and the concerns have been resolved, this is also scheduled for action tonight if the council would like to do that.
Councilman Peterson, this is in your district. Any position or concerns or questions you have representing that area?
I think all of my concerns have been answered tonight, Mayor, as far as the conforming and not having something go out of line. It sounds like it's something that could work, and especially with the office park working with them and making sure that any of their concerns were addressed. It sounds like to me that the Planning Commission did a good job on this.
Yeah, it's nice to get a vacant building upgraded, and
I just don't know if Dave is famous anymore.
yeah, I don't think so.
That's too
Yeah.
bad.
Any other comments or questions
Yeah,
regarding?
I had, and I hope that, Mike, this doesn't catch you too terribly unawares. I was just looking at the other buildings in that ORD zone and trying to find out where those property lines are. Do any of them conform to the ORD setbacks?
They may not.
I know that you didn't look at that, but I'm just looking, I mean, I see some of those lines, if that's, and I mean, I understand that that zone was put on this property when we incorporated. I don't know what was there before, but it seems to be kind of a, it's like there's no way that this entire development, this whole triangle of property could have been developed under our current zoning without some significant parcel. I don't know, what do you call that? Subdividing or subdivision, that type of thing. Does that seem to be accurate?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And, I don't know if there's technical details in there where you're within the same project and just subdividing for ownership, if there's a difference there. But there's a good chance that a lot of that is non-conforming, just because that was developed, prior to us being a city.
All right, thank you, Mike, and thank you everybody for your comments. Again, we'll be taking comments during our business meeting, and then it'll be an action item. So let's move on to item C, affordable housing text amendment. I know this was presented once before, a few meetings back, but Mike?
Yeah, let's go one more time. Okay, so I've got a lot of the background here, and this is the same presentation that was shown previously, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but the discussion that was brought before council was just a preliminary discussion to gauge the council's kind of input or opinion on a potential amendment to the affordable housing provision in the Plan Development District Ordinance. You can see that the current language in the ordinance requires in any project that has 50 residential units or more, 10% of those units have to be affordable to households making 50% or less of the city's median income. So it's an affordable housing provision in the current ordinance. And we went through a lot of this background information because the developer for the Northern Gravel Pit has it proposed today, they are proposing 80% AMI rather than 50% AMI. And largely the reason they're doing that is because nationally and at the state level and even locally, 80% is generally recognized as the most common affordable housing cost level. And what that means is at 80% AMI, you can open up opportunities to finance projects and to get housing subsidies much more readily than you can at different income levels. So I think the intent of all these policy slides was to show that there is certainly a need for 80% AMI units in the city. There's also a need for 50% and 30%. Statewide, there's just a need for affordable housing, but changing any affordable housing benchmark to 80% AMI rather than 50% does not negatively affect the city's ability to meet our affordable housing obligations as are laid out by the state code and in our affordable housing plan. So you can say 50% is considered very low income, 80% is just low income, but they are all classified under the umbrella of affordable housing or moderate income housing, as these things are referred to at various levels of government. And if you have any questions on any of that, I can go back, but I'll go back to the request at hand. The council's feedback the last time was that you were interested in seeing what the Planning Commission felt about this request. So the applicant made a formal application and that was presented to the Planning Commission for public hearing and consideration. The initial applicant proposal is the top bullet point there. They requested just a change from 10% of units provided at 50% area median income to 10% of units provided at 80% area median income. So no change in the number of units provided, just a change in the affordability. I will come back to the second bullet point because that's an update as of today. Staff's recommendation when we took this to the Planning Commission was, again, we're supportive of an 80% AMI, as that still meets the city's affordable housing goals. But if we're providing units at 80% AMI rather than 50, then additional units should be provided. And there should be sort of a sliding scale. So if you're providing units at 80% AMI, then you ought to provide at least 15 or 20% of the units rather than that 10% that's required today. If you want to provide units at a more affordable rate of, say, 50% AMI, then you can do that. And then you would still only have to provide 10% of the units. So that adds flexibility. The more affordable, the fewer the units, with a minimum of 10% in any case. The Planning Commission considered this and made the recommendation that a minimum of 20% of units in the project should be provided as BMR units if affordable at 80% AMI, again with that same flexibility. And going into the Planning Commission, and we talked about this when we talked with the council last, we have a city initiated amendment to the Plan Development District Ordinance that will be introduced to Planning Commission here shortly. And in that, we were looking at this provision already, which is why we aren't opposed to supporting something that modifies this requirement. And in our preliminary draft, we have 15 to 20% of units should be provided if they're affordable at 80% AMI. So there's some context and something that we were thinking about already, and then the applicant came in and made a proposal. Based on the Planning Commission's recommendation and the process so far, and then looking at, this is a proposed amendment that will affect any PDD project in the city, but the applicant looked at their own, their own project as they considered this. They have revised their proposal from their original 10% units at 80% AMI to 15% units at 80% AMI. We got this about an hour before the meeting. So at a high level, I think staff is still supportive of this. This is still within the kind of that margin of units that we were thinking originally as taking forward for amendment. But it is different than the Planning Commission's recommendation. So we'll continue to look into this. It's only on for public comment tonight, and it will be back, and we'll come back with a more solid recommendation at the next meeting. But again, at a topical level, we are still supportive of that 15% of units being provided at 80% AMI, and less units if the units are more affordable. With this planning,
sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you confused me for a second. You said that the applicant was comfortable with the 20%, but then they came back today and said, no, we're not, it's 15%. Did I misunderstand that? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. This is confusing. There's a lot of percentages being thrown out there. So I apologize for making it confusing. The applicant's proposal is that originally, as part of their application, was the top one. So 10% of units at 80% AMI. The Planning Commission recommended approval with the condition that or a suggestion that the minimum number of units be increased from 10% to 20%. So they made that recommendation, but in the meeting, and they voted on that, but in the meeting, the applicant didn't, their request is still technically the 10% of units until today. They said 20% presents some challenges for us from a financing perspective and being able to implement this. But 15% is what the applicant has agreed to revise their proposal to. And I'll add them here in a minute so they can answer any questions you have about that.
I don't think I need to ask some questions. I'd be more curious to hear from you why your recommendation differs from the Planning Commission, why you have a range of what the applicant is asking, which is 15%, and what the Planning Commission has voted on. Why are you less than the Planning Commission?
So the staff recommendation, the way this works is staff makes a recommendation, then the Planning Commission recommends it, and then it comes to council. So our recommendation was in place, and it's 15 to 20% because that was the range that we had put in place as a starting point for discussion when we took forward the city initiated amendment. And it's
but
something
why?
that we.
My question is why 15 and not 30? Why 20 and not 10? Like why did you land on 15? Because it seems to me that this essentially is a policy issue, right? This is actually one of the issues where we as a council can say, we have a policy where we want to do X in a certain area in exchange for more density, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, really, this is a policy issue for us to decide what we're willing to give up to have more low income here. So I'm really just trying to understand like the heart, the meat of this. Like, let's ignore that there's an applicant here, because it's really not about the applicant. It's about our city. It's about affordable housing. It's about doing right by people that want to live here, that can't afford it, and meeting housing shortage, right?
Yeah.
I just want to be sure that we're not thinking about who's asking us. We're thinking about what's right and what's the proper policy.
Sure. Yeah, so I will say our range was in place before this proposal came along, before we started discussing it. The reason it's a range is because I don't know at this point what the right answer is. And the intention here is to provide more flexibility. So if a developer wants to provide 50% AMI housing, they can do that and only have to provide 10% of the units in a project at that. If they want to provide and more conventionally finance 80% AMI units, that still meets the city's goals and still fits a need that the city has. But the trade-off there is they have to provide additional units. Just as an example, I know that's a more general policy issue, but with this 20-acre proposal that we'll introduce to you at the next meeting, they are proposing 419 units. So 10% is 42 units, 15% is 63, and then 20% would be 84. So it changes by about 21 units.
So Mike,
5%.
Mike, our staff are going forward, because again, this is tonight is just more information. Are you going to maybe more formalize your position as staff? Rather, I mean, I always feel uncomfortable with ranges. Obviously, I'm not sure I see that in policy, but are you going to be taking the position of the percent? Are you going to
Yeah, we will. Like I said, I got the email from the applicant at about 4 o'clock today, so I haven't had a chance to really analyze this and analyze the impacts of, let's say on the southern gravel pit project, when that comes in, it's much larger. There's the potential for many more units. Another part of the rationale behind this is 80% AMI units. There is more private financing available for those. So, with these large projects that have quite a few affordable units, there's potentially less of a discussion of the city having to help subsidize some of these 50% units, which is just commonly done in other cities to provide affordable housing. So 80% still gives the city affordable housing, but provides more opportunity for the private development community to finance these things on their own, rather than to lean on CRA tax increment revenues, if that's applicable, or other subsidies to try to provide these units.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate our applicant and them bringing this to our attention. But as Christine said, which I support, I think this is a policy that'll obviously carry over to many other developments. So I think we just want to get it right. And I appreciate the background information, because it seems like our 50% issue was out of line. So I appreciate the staff fine-tuning their recommendation and looking at not just this development, but going forward in other developments as well, to have the appropriate percent of units. So any further questions of Mike or the applicant?
No, I appreciate the Planning Commission's recommendation, and I actually probably lean towards the 20% at 80. I'd be really, really interested to find out what that sliding scale looks like. It'd have to be pretty strict, or pretty, not open to. It just seems. If they're going to do a couple of 50% units, that's great. Maybe that gives us some credit for less 80s. I'd be really interested to hear what that is. I'm interested to hear what the public has to say. It was obviously from some of our other statistics that there was quite a few more of our populace that is in that 80% range. And so providing more of those, I think, is certainly a benefit. So I guess I like the Planning Commission recommendation, and I'm glad that they took that as this is for them. This wasn't an administrative decision; it was a legislative recommendation to us.
So Mike, when does it come back to us again?
Sorry, I have a
Go ahead.
couple.
Christine, go ahead. All right, go ahead.
On as an add-on to what Councilmember Bracken said, is there any kind of a multiplier? I apologize that I don't know this. So that if you do have some 50% AMI units that counts as, you know, X more, is there some benefit to us to encourage that, or it's just, it is what it is?
Well, I think we want there to be some incentive, and maybe it's not projects at a large scale, it's maybe the smaller ones, because there is really, in every community, there's always a great need for the 30% to 50% AMI units. So the thought behind the sliding scale is if a developer is able to provide those I'd say very low income units, then they don't have to provide as many of them. So there's an incentive for them to try to look for ways to provide those cheaper units. If they can't, or if they don't want to, then this 80% option would be available, but they would have to provide more units at that rate.
Okay, and then one last question, I apologize, but I think this is an important topic, and I almost think we should spend more time as a council talking about the policy as it relates to what we think are, as Councilmember Bracken said, our residents and constituents would be interested in. But on your findings on page 72 in the packet, there's a sentence here, I just didn't quite understand it, so I'll just read it. The availability of outside funding and the slight increase in rents allowed to be charged for 80% AMI units helps reduce or eliminate the need for substantial public subsidies to construct affordable units.
Yeah.
So can you, the way I read that, it makes it sounds like you can actually charge more in rents for those units that are supposed to be for the 80% AMI, or am I
yeah, the rationale behind that is rent is higher for an 80% unit than it is for a 50% unit. But also that the outside financing I'm talking about is, you know, like HUD financing. They'll finance affordable units at 80%, but not at 50. So again, where the conventional definition of affordable housing is 80%, there are more opportunities for developers to share in the cost of providing those affordable units, rather than to approach the municipality to ask for subsidies to provide all of those.
And help me understand, when developers go out for tax increment financing, oftentimes I think there's a 10% set aside for affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Do these developers have, I mean, you talk about HUD, but at what point are those dollars utilized? Are those dollars we could use as a city to then reimburse the developer for that? I'm sorry, I never understood that.
You want me to address that, Mike?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What we would do and it's a policy decision also, but it would be through agreement with the developer. Our community development renewal agency would enter into an agreement to provide some of those funds for incentives, or not incentives, but for a project if we deemed it appropriate. And I've seen that in my career multiple times, but it's all through negotiated agreements if we're going to contribute to that. Right now in this area, there's not a redevelopment area, but that's something that we're looking at down the road, as you know.
Yeah, I know that, but I don't understand, because I've been involved on the developer side of these transactions, where if I go into a county and I say like tax increment financing, and there's always a 10% set aside to housing, where that money comes into. So did we get that 10% on the development of the Canyon Center? So do we have some 10% set aside sort of floating around already when we entered into that agreement, or did we not do that then?
No, I don't believe it was a requirement to have the housing set aside when that with that CDA at that time. I might be wrong, but I don't think there is a 10% set aside in that project.
Because that was just too far. The legislation wasn't.
Yeah, that's accurate. The way, when that one was set up as a CDA, the 10% housing set aside was not required. It is now, so any new ones we establish will have that.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim, I don't want to put an undue burden on staff, but if we could do some kind of sliding scale that showed the developer an option, you know, like maybe 2 or 3% at the 50% median income mark, and then shifting on up to give options to a developer as a piece of the legislation. Would that be hard to do?
No, I think we'll take a stab at that, and it's something, you know, if we're going to allow flexibility, we should put brackets around it and define, you know, generally how we are flexible and what that looks like. So we'll take a shot at that.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to allude to, and Christine used the multiplier effect. I think that, yeah, that needs to be, if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that it's rock solid with good guardrails.
And also with that, Mike, too, if there's some precedent of using a sliding scale or multiplier that someone else has done, we may have a model we can look at and see if there's been successes or how it's been applied. So I think in your previous presentation, you shared with us some other municipalities of what they've used.
Yeah, and that showed that you know, affordable housing in many surrounding communities is most commonly provided at 80% AMI, and then any public subsidies, almost all of them came from CRAs or their equivalent in those areas with tax increment financing.
Okay, Mike, do you have enough feedback to proceed and come back with information?
Yes, and I think the applicant will want to speak. We can hold and have them present in the business meeting if you want to move on to get to the next item.
Yeah, I think we have to. I'm sorry, but I think hopefully they can see that we're sensitive to their proposed text amendment. So we're looking at that. With what you bring back, I think we'll be able to proceed in a timely fashion. But we've only got about 15 minutes. We got one more important item. So appreciate their understanding, and if the council okay, we'll move forward to item D, which is the Wasatch Front Regional Council grant discussion. Matt, I think we've got 5 proposals and we need to shortlist that down to 3 as per their request. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so Mayor and Council, if you'll recall, on the 15th, about the 15th of September, staff presented 5 projects to the City Council for review for the Wasatch Front Regional Council grants, which are the STP, surface transportation, the TAP, the transportation alternatives, as well as the CMAQ, which is the congestion and mitigation and air quality. Staff presented to council 5 projects, and you discussed those 5 projects as a council, and you asked us to submit all 5 of them as a preliminary letter of intent. We did do that, and all 5 of those projects came back as eligible to apply, not eligible. Well, they are eligible for the money because of the way we presented it, but they asked us, they said these are eligible to apply for the final. Now on December 10th, we're required to submit the final application, and they've asked us to narrow this down to about 3 projects. So staff is presenting to you these 5 projects with our recommendation of what we would consider the 3 best projects, but obviously this is for the council to decide. Our first project for recommending to the council that we apply for is this 1700 East Sidewalk project. This is installing a sidewalk on the west side of 1700 East and going from Fort Union up to 7200. It opens, we have a lot of requests for pedestrian access on that road, and we feel like that's an important project that we should bring forward. Also, our second recommendation to the council, once again, it's up to you as a council to decide if you want to go forward with this, is if you'll recall here on Bengal Boulevard and Highland Drive, last year we received funding about $1.3 million to improve this intersection with turning lanes and bicycle lanes. And what we're requesting now is to extend the sidewalk from, I forget, let me make sure I got it right, Valere down to Bengal Cove. So extending the sidewalk. You'll see this gap right here. I hope, am my screen being shared? I'm talking through. This gap right here is actually part of the project we received funding for last year. So we're proposing that we connect the trail and sidewalk here and up to here to obviously add for pedestrian safety for the students that are walking. And the third project that we are asking, or we are recommending, or our third priority project would be the sidewalk on Creek Road at Peppers Hill. This is the area right here is the Watson Hollow subdivision that just went in. And this is the section of the hill that is without sidewalk, and it's been on our radar for quite a bit, and we would like to finalize that. So those are the three that we're recommending as our top three choices. The other options were here on Fort Union. Now this says on the north side. I apologize if anybody has read that. This is actually on the south side. It's a connection between the two condominium projects, tying that in for a trail and sidewalk project on Fort Union. And the other one is, this was heavily discussed, if you'll recall, Wasatch Boulevard reconstruction and widening, which would take Wasatch Boulevard to a 3-lane or a center lane road with curb gutter, sidewalk, and bicycle trail on the east and west side. So those are the 5 projects for you to discuss, with our recommendation at this point that we do the TAP, or the transportation alternative projects, which are the sidewalk, the 1700 East, the Bengal Boulevard intersection, extending that sidewalk, as well as the Creek Road sidewalk project. Any questions? Or I'm ready.
Is there a reason that the one that's there at the top, the Fort Union Boulevard sidewalk and trail project, isn't or couldn't be meshed with the 1700 East project? I mean, they're just like right there.
Exactly my question.
Oh, sorry, Mayor.
No, that's, well, actually 4 of the 5 are sidewalks. And I'm just wondering if they can be consolidated. And
Mike Johnson, Mike, you might want to harp in here a little bit. I don't know exactly where the 2 projects are. I assume they're right here and right here. Is that correct?
Yeah, one's at 17th East and one is just past the fire station.
So right here.
One on Fort Union is pretty substantial. What that would involve, you may remember the 2 projects going in right now, we require them to build not only a sidewalk, but a wider sidewalk and then a separated bike path. And that required some right-of-way dedication. So a lot of this funding, this would be a much more expensive project, and a lot of it would be utilized for property negotiation and acquisition to install the enhanced sidewalk and the bike lane on Fort Union Boulevard. So I think it's probably best to keep them separate because they're much different scales. And yeah, that's, if you have any more questions.
I appreciate that, Mike. It is a lot of property issue and negotiations. The others, we actually own quite a bit of the property. And so they were a much easier project to pick and put forward as far as cost, more bang for the dollars.
Yeah, it's hard for me to evaluate these a little bit because there's not a fiscal amount tied to each one. So when Mike says, well, this one is much more substantial, it's hard to know how substantial these are with respect to budget, because I know sitting on several boards, that dollar amount has an impact when they make decisions. So do you have any rough idea? And we probably don't have time to do that though, but of what?
I don't have the cost associated with them at this point. We do have some, I'd have to dig down and find it. But when we talk about this project on Fort Union, you are talking about property purchases, or at least negotiations with any future developer that might come in. Right now, we don't have a developer between there. So it would be a property purchase.
That's the Canyons Church, correct?
There's the church, and I think I don't know if it's a chiropractor, a small little office building, and then the fire station. we have talked to the fire station. They're, even without acquisition, they're generally supportive of a project along there. So we're not quite as worried about them, but
So the
there
church
are-
gets pretty close to the street there.
yeah.
Yeah, I can see why that would be separated. Christine, what's your position on Wasatch?
Well, I had another question.
Go ahead.
On the one sidewalk related to the Watson Cove development or whatever you called it. Why didn't the developers put in the sidewalk there? Is it not frontage to what they're developing?
It's not frontage related. They put the sidewalk in front of their property.
Yeah, this is a
Done. There's just this
the
gap that
backyard of
needs to
another
be
house.
filled.
Oh, okay, I see it. I see it now. Okay, great. Mayor Peterson, I'm comfortable with not pursuing. I think I expressed some concern on several different levels about the Wasatch Boulevard expansion. I don't know if you recall my concern there.
Okay, yep, I just wanted to make sure if you're still in that same position, because it helps us with respect to your district, focus in on the staff's recommendation of 17th East, Bengal Boulevard. If anybody's been on that turn when you come on and go past the triangle onto 7th East, or I should say not 7th East, Highland Drive, to me, that's a high priority.
No, I think, and it works great with the other developments as we just redesign that intersection.
Yep.
In fact, there's potential there. The right of way for Highland Drive actually extends. If you look at where those houses are all set back, you could go significantly further north with some sort of a path or where you've got it too is good, but that actually extends quite a ways down Highland. It could be long-term extended quite a bit.
Yeah, so to me, that Bengal Boulevard is a critical one. On 17th East, I think we've had issues historically as safe walking routes for students. To me, that's a public safety issue there as well. After that, what was your third recommendation?
The
Creek
Peppers
Road.
Hill.
When you just come down the hill right there. Is that where we had the washout?
Yes, sir. Coming out of Watson Hollow. Yes, that is correct. This one.
That's not along, but
It's almost like the end of the big Cottonwood Trail where you had the two houses that
you actually have this part of the sidewalk and trail ends right here, and then it picks up right here at Watson Hollow. There's this gap right here.
Yeah.
Between the two.
And it's kind of dangerous there too. As you drive down, it's a steep hill. I'm personally comfortable with those three as priorities based upon the comments I've heard with what challenges Fort Union would have, and with Councilman Michael's reservation on Wasatch Boulevard. I support those three, me personally, but the council can state their position. Yeah.
I do as well. I think 17th East is definitely a priority, getting the kids, especially from Santa Fe and the other apartment complex up there to the school has been I know Debbie Durchie has done work on it, talked to a lot of the residents there already. And I know that I've talked to Matt about this type, about how important that is to get them in a safe position. I'm just hoping that development will finish up quicker. It seems like it kind of stalled for a little bit, and I'm hoping that we can get that taken care of quickly. It's a little bit dangerous right now.
Well, too, we should hopefully for funding from Wasatch Front. It's always a time-consuming process. Yeah.
Mayor and council, sorry, Mayor, I don't know. Is there any other questions before I ask my next one?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I've laid out three priorities. They're going to ask us to prioritize ours 1, 2, and 3. So I've laid it out from staff's point of view. 1700 East is number 1. Number 2 was the Bengal, and number 3 is Creek Road. Are we in agreement on this?
That's what I was going to say.
I was just going to ask a question related to that in terms of magnitude. I assume that your option 3 is the least expensive, and if we decided that was important, that perhaps that could be included in a budget discussion.
Yeah, item 3 is the least costly, correct, and that could possibly be. It's been up, and in the years I've been here, it's been up a couple of times for discussion. And it's always been, let's see what we can get or what we can get out of the grants. So yes, it's certainly an option for budgetary discussion.
And Mayor, from your experience in your boards, it's likely that we have a better chance of getting 1 than 3 and maybe not 2? What's the?
Well, yeah, usually the low hanging fruit, when some of the developments out on the west side that are massive and they come in with multi-millions, some of these boards really look at these smaller projects as feel-good projects that they can get something done. Then they look at the east-west of the valley. They want to make sure they give some things to the east side. So having a couple of smaller projects like all 3 of these, I think adds to our chance of getting some things. I think actually 17th East is a little bit like Creek Road, as it's a fairly small project, but Bengal Boulevard is probably the most expensive, and we already have a piece already going, but I can go either way. I lean slightly to Bengal Boulevard as number 2, 7th East, Bengal Boulevard number 1, 17th East number 2, and then Creek number 3. But I don't feel strongly about it. If others feel 17th East should be the highest priority, I'm okay with that as well.
I have to admit, I really like the Bengal Boulevard one. I think that's a very dangerous corner there, but could be utilized for students to be walking to school from that neighborhood. But maybe not. Maybe they just choose to walk through the neighborhood anyway. I think they're both, all 3 of them are great projects. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to look at them.
But hasn't 17th East been on our budget request before to the council?
Yes, in fact, we talked about it in our retreat, and the neighbors or the residents there, as Matt has indicated, they have really, and Councilmember Peterson indicated, they have really been organized because of the need as kids are walking to school from those apartments. It's a big issue, and that's one that we talked about just this past year.
Yeah. I'm fine doing 17th East as number 1, and I think we just need to fight and use any connection we have to get both 17th East and Bengal Boulevard, get them both funded, because they seem to be on the lower echelon of price tags compared to many things Wasatch Front will look at.
And the good thing about both of those is, like I said, on Bengal, we own all of the property. On 17th East, we own quite a bit, and the residents, as Councilmember Peterson has said, the residents have offered to dedicate the land needed just so they can get the sidewalk. And if you'll look on it, you'll notice a lot of those properties have already set back some in anticipation of these things occurring. So I think we're in good shape as far as cost. That's very helpful.
I'd love to see that 17th East go in, and I feel good about the other 2 options as well.
Yeah, I see a lot of synergy on Bengal, so yeah, let's pursue it. Hopefully we'll get a couple of these done.
So
Okay,
1, 2, and 3 is laid out.
1A is 17th East, 1B is Bengal, and number 2 is Creek Road.
Okay. Thank you.
And just like that at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, we got 2 minutes. Just a quick reminder that Visit Santa at his workshop, which is a virtual visit, is coming up on December 5th. For everyone's information. Any final comments in 60 seconds before we adjourn and reconvene in 5 minutes?
I have one thing.
Christine, yeah.
I just wanted to see if there was anything that we as a council can do to help Tim get this Utah Attorney General's report quickly. It seems like I've had people reaching out to me. I don't know if others have, but it seems like it's taking a while, and I think it'd be nice to help support Tim if you need it. Tim, I don't know if you're probably pushing as hard as you can, but I'd just love to see that chapter from our city perspective closed.
I'm willing to make a call to the AG's office and just encourage them to move as quickly as they feel they can based upon the volume of information that I know they're looking at. I know that they got a lot of information once we put up on our website where they could send it, and they got just inundated with volumes. But I'm glad to make the call if there's some other suggestion that someone has. But we
Maybe
all
just
want-
some reassurances. I've had constituents really concerned that they're postponing looking at our city. So maybe if we could just get some assurance that they are looking and that the delay is caused due to them looking heavily.
That's what's been conveyed to me is
Okay.
just the amount of information as part of the delay. So
Yeah, we'll make another
I've been working
contact.
on
We'll make another contact with that assurance that it's not being delayed and that they're moving as quickly as they feasibly can, and that it's critical to us to have something as soon as possible. And we'll report back. You're muted, Christine.
I was just going to say, it's always helpful, like when you're at the doctor's office waiting, if somebody would just tell you you have to wait 20 minutes instead of sitting there and waiting and wondering 20 minutes, if they could just say it's going to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or we'll have an update for you in 2 weeks. I think some kind of a timeline, I say it all the time, I apologize, but I think something to set expectations is always better than just wondering.
We'll see if we can get something clarified. And it's interesting you say seeing doctors. I had an employee once who actually billed the doctor because he waited an hour and a half. Sidebar. All right, we'll do that, and I'll work with Tim on making that happen. If there's no other comments, I entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene at 7:06 or 7:05.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Bracken. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Oops, sorry.
Seconded by
Go ahead, Doug.
Councilmember Peterson. All in favor, just say aye or put your thumbs up. Aye.
I
More
Aye.
importantly, for the record, is anybody opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.